What's up? My name is Ken Dumbo, the MC with the sauce. Don't forget to subscribe to J. Cool.
There's some form of foul play in terms of where the body really is.
I don't think so. I mean, if you remember, President Hichilema told the country that he knew that former President Edgar Lungu died in the very early hours of 5th June 2025. I have seen statements to the effect that maybe he's not dead, but those statements have not come from the government, particularly its leadership. I don't think that the president lied when he told the country that he knew, not that he had, no, he knew. He used the word knew, which means knowledge. He knew that former President Lungu had died. So there's no dispute as far as I'm concerned that former President Lungu is dead. I've seen the death certificate as well. It's normal that some people would feel that given the developments that have happened since his death, the contestation or the dispute over the burial place, and the refusal by the family to allow particularly state actors to see the body. I think it's normal that those kind of concerns can be raised by ordinary people, but I think they must be understood in context, and that context is one where you have the family saying we don't want former president, rather President Hakainde Hichilema to be present or anywhere near the funeral of his predecessor. And that means that even the agents of the government or the state are seen as connected to the person that the family doesn't want to see the body of the former president. If you remember when the Pretoria High Court made a ruling, the elder sister to former President Lungu, Bertha Lungu, made a statement, a revelation in court that explains the family's fears. She said that the family believes that President Hichilema wants to the body of his predecessor, not because they want to give him a dignified burial, but because it's their belief that he wants to use the body for ritual purposes. We don't know how accurate that is. It may be entirely untrue, but that's their belief. And then you have to understand then the refusal by the family to allow state agents to see the body in that context, to say maybe the fear is that if we allow this to happen, it would provide an opportunity for state actors to lay access to the body and use it for the ritual purposes. The state, however, is saying no. We just want to give him a dignified burial. You see, Andrew, in addition to understanding those sentiments within that context, it's also, I think, worth saying that this dispute says a number of things about the state of politics in our country today. I think the first is the role of superstition in our politics. It's an issue that we have not really discussed publicly, ventilated upon as citizens, but it has found itself at the center of this dispute. On the one hand, you have the family that believes, as I say, we worry that our deceased or our loved ones' bodies are going to be used for rituals. It's difficult to prove these things because they are belief systems. I don't believe in it. You don't believe in it. I imagine, but the families need to believe in this, to entertain these beliefs. And it's not for us to simply say you are wrong or you are right. It's for us to understand that's very, very important to them. On the other hand, you have the state represented by the Attorney General insisting that they want to accord the former president a dignified burial. And then the family gave a condition, said, but you can do that without President Hichilema being present, because the wishes of the deceased were that he should stay away. When you have a president insisting in being present, it fuels those suspicions from the family to say, but why are you insisting? Why can't you designate somebody else, such as the vice president, for example, represent you at this event, at this funeral. And it was indeed that failure to agree on that issue that contributed to this outcome where we now have this matter in court. So the role of superstition in our politics is one thing that we have not really explored, and it's one that has been brought to the fore by this particular dispute. There's another matter, of course, that doesn't reflect very well on the Zambian government, particularly the president. And this is in relation to the ongoing court case against those two suspects who are said to have planned to assassinate President Hichilema using witchcraft. Or they were arrested by the police together with a chameleon and charged under the Witchcraft Act. It's the colonial era law that, as far as I know, no president has used to take citizens or non-citizens to court on the basis that you want to assassinate me using witchcraft. You don't do that if you don't believe in these things. You don't have a belief in the superstition that somebody can actually kill you using witchcraft. It's something that you can distance yourself from. It shows again that superstition is becoming an important, subject in our politics. The second issue I think that this dispute highlights is the personality nature of our politics, how much our politics is driven by personality rather than national agendas or wider public interest. If you listen to the Lungu family, their position is simple. They are saying the former president Lungu did not want a particular person, Hakainde Hichilema, who happened to be our president, to be present at the funeral of his predecessor. And that's very the problem there. There's nothing in it for the country there. There's nothing for the nation. It's about this person that we don't want at this particular funeral. What does the public seek to gain out of those positions? Very little. So it's not a national agenda. Then you have, on the other hand, President Hichilema himself, who insists on presiding over this funeral. And even when the family has explicitly made it very clear that, hey, we don't want you or you are unwelcome at this event. Why would you insist on going to a funeral where the mourners have explicitly told you, we don't want you? Again, it's about, ego. It's about, how do I feel about this? I'm president. I should have my way. I should be the one to preside over this funeral. It's not a less of a state funeral if for example, the president decided to delegate to Vice President Mtaina Mango, or indeed any other state official to represent him, as he has done on many other occasions. For example, what is important is to make sure that you put the interest of the nation at heart. When you are president, it doesn't mean that you should always have your way, but it shows you again the point I'm making. So it's about the personalities. You see, Andrew, when you listen even beyond this issue of the burial, when you listen to the content or substance of our politics, or what passes in the substance of our politics, it's really personal issues. They have hardly any discussion that look at what are the foremost challenges that Zambia faces today, because you should always start there. What are these challenges? So that once you've identified challenges, then you draw the policy appeals that should address those challenges. If you ask anyone who is aspiring for leadership today, you hear so many people nowadays coming up to say, I want to be president, I want to challenge HH. You ask them, what's the first thing that you're going to do? They won't know, or the answer that they're going to give you is not something that is rooted in a national agenda. If you actually take time to think about our challenges, you'll find that many of Zambia's foremost challenges are not even the internal squabbles that we see politicians fighting for. They're external. They are huge, both corporate as well as non-corporate interests that really are drawing Zambia's agenda. Businesses, if you talk to these businesses, for example, they are thriving today in Zambia. They will tell you the economy is doing very well, the fundamentals are doing very well. But if you go to the common man, for them, the economy means, do I have access to stable electricity, for example? Is the cost of living lower? Is the price of minimum affordable? That's the economy of the average citizen, the ordinary citizen. But for the bigger corporations, is are we getting enough money from copper or from other minerals, for example? They're reaping profits, for example. And you hear government, for example, government officials saying, we are increasing copper production. We want to increase copper production to this or maybe 3 million metric tons annually. But is the country, for example, gaining sufficient revenue from that increase in coal production, or is it a case of having foreign actors really making their way when the average citizen remains poor? The fundamental issues are bigger, but we focus on this personality issue. So that's the second issue. The final one is in terms of what this dispute has shown, is how divided the country is. What is right is no longer a question of it's no longer standard. It is a matter of who do I support. Supporters of the governing party, for example, the government position in this dispute, who do not see anything right in terms of what the Lungu family is saying. They won't even feel empathy for them. These are people who are mourning. They haven't even yet buried their loved one. And you can imagine the extended deep sorrow and pain that they must be going through. But when you listen to supporters of the governing party or the government, for example, when you read platforms associated with the party in power, the kind of insults, the vile attacks that are made in the Lungu family shows how much we have lost even our humanity. Because in African culture, when somebody has died, you go to lighten the burden of the family. And you are able to take a back seat and say, no, but that is wrong, because you are able to see that, you have that kind of sense of right and wrong. But when you read the comments, whether it's somebody singing to say, Akatumbi Kalaisa, or whether it's somebody saying, oh, we have defeated Lungu even in death, for example, it shows you how polarized you have become. On the other side, when you have the supporters of the former ruling party, the PF, for example, anything the government says is treated with suspicion. So the government is wrong or is right, is lying, because there's no attempt whatsoever to look at these issues with a critical distance that is required and say, in moments like this of sorrow, can we, bridge the divide and make sure that we come together to afford our former president a dignified burial. So in the context of all these issues that I've highlighted, those sentiments of saying, is he really dead, should be understood as part of that polarization that has engulfed our nation.
Well, it's good you describe how toxic our politics have become. And for some people, they see the Lungu family, to be quite unreasonable with some of the conditions that they have, especially for the state. And I'll give you a practical example and I'll demonstrate. The Attorney General wonders why the family insists that President HH must not be anywhere near the casket. He wonders what is it about the casket, or what is it about the body of President Lungu that he doesn't need his colleague to be near it. You don't find, do you find these sentiments from the side of the state to be unreasonable, or perhaps they've got a justifiable reason to think like that?
I think that was just lack of sincerity. I don't understand why it is so difficult to do the right thing when people are in government. Even things where there's no need to tell a lie or to be disingenuous, people find it easy to lie. I don't understand what happened to people when they move to these government positions. With regard to the specific matter that you have raised about the Attorney General, I think that the Attorney General surely is aware why the Lungu family doesn't want President Hichilema anywhere near the body of their loved one. If you recall, in June, when the government and the family of President Lungu reached some common understanding with regards to the repatriation of his remains from South Africa to Zambia, at the come together event where there was the family represented by Makebi Zulu and I think the sister Beta Lungu and Richard Musukwa and others. And then you had Patrick Kangwa and Kavindele and others presenting the state. At that event, Makebi Zulu, the spokesperson of the Lungu family, made it very clear to say they don't want President Hichilema anywhere near the funeral of his predecessor because they were left with very clear instructions by the deceased to say those who never showed him any interest in his welfare when he was alive should not be allowed to pretend that they care for him in his death. That was a very clear reason that they gave, and I don't think that the Attorney General missed that one. So that's one. The Attorney General also surely was present in court when Betha Lungu, the eldest sister to the former president, made a statement to the effect that she believes President Hichilema wants the remains of her brother for ritual purposes. Because when she was making those statements, we saw those statements in court. He was within the vicinity. She was shouting. Some people tried to cover her mouth, but by the time they succeeded in doing so, she had really spoken her mind. And she was using Bemba. Kabesha understand that language very well. And so I don't think that the question of saying why do they want to, what reason does the family have for wanting Hichilema to be present at the burial was sincere. He knows that. Even beyond that, I watched that program where he made that statement. I think it was on Sunday interview hosted by Gruvaza Zuru. On that program, he also said, who has told the family, for example, that President Hichilema will be anywhere near the casket. Again, that's lack of sincerity, because if you look at the government program that was issued by the Secretary to Cabinet's office, it said that when the body on arrival in Lusaka will be received, President Hichilema will be there to be the one to receive it. And more suspiciously for the family, it was indicated that the body will be kept for 30 minutes at the airport in some building. I think where as you know, the Kenneth Kaunda Airport has the terminal for everybody else, and you have the smaller one for the president. So I would imagine that it would have been kept at the presidential terminal, and that's where the program showed that there will be a small church service to be conducted by somebody unknown. We don't even know what church organization is going to conduct over that church service. We don't know the bishop or pastor who was going to conduct over that service. And the family said, we don't approve of this because it was not something that was agreed or discussed with the family. And again, you can't do that if you're president without coming near the casket of the body. Kabesha surely saw that program, and that's why I'm saying he was being insincere. If you looked at the program further, it said that after, I think the body would lie in state at the former President Lungu's residence, the members of the public were going to be afforded the opportunity to do body viewing on a Thursday. I think it was coming on a Wednesday, and then the following day, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, it was scheduled to be taken to Mulungushi International Conference Center from 9 a.m. to about 4 p.m. to enable members of the public to pay their last respects to the former President Lungu. The program showed that President Hichilema was to be the first person to view the body before any member of the public does. In addition to feeding this suspicion or superstition on the part of the family, that actually indicated that the president would be near the casket. So you can't have the Attorney General saying, can you give us reasons, when the reasons are plenty and they're in the public domain. I'm saying, we really should do, I think we should respect the Zambian people, because some of the sentiment that we hear from whether it's politicians or government officials, you start thinking, what do you think of Zambians when you say some of these things? Zambians are able to see the program. Zambians are able to see that the program in South Africa, where there was that joint collaboration between the parties. And Zambians were able to listen to Betha Lungu's sentiments within the precincts of the court building following the ruling by the Pretoria High Court. It can't be that the only person who didn't hear those words was the Attorney General. It can't be that the Attorney General is not aware of the program that was issued by the Office of the Secretary to the Cabinet, actually knows all those things, and there's no need to belabor the point, because we should focus more on these substantive issues to say, what can we do? What can we learn from this experience? For example, whether it's strengthening the law, or whether it's the question of negotiating when we have this kind of dispute. What do we do to make sure that we don't have a situation like this in the future? But what we have, the Attorney General who made this kind of sentiments you are raising, which was very unfortunate.
Let's start with the reaction that government has given to this ruling by the Constitutional Court in South Africa. Immediately after the ruling of the Constitutional Court, Mr. Patrick Kangwa did have a press briefing, and he communicated that government's position remains unchanged, and that they remain committed to reaching an arrangement with the late president's family that balances their wishes with the rights and responsibilities of government. What do you make of this, quick reaction that the government has given to the ConCourt ruling?
I think it's a sensible reaction. You see, in this matter, the conduct of Patrick Kangwa, the State Cabinet, has been very professional. Even with regard to the initial negotiations, I think the family didn't have a problem with the State Cabinet. There was a concern around the composition of the delegation that was sent, but that was really in relation to people like, Tavindele, former Vice President, Leslie Mbula, the Secretary of Cabinet, and Mulambo Haimbe, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I think the family was very uncomfortable about not just the arrogance of some of those people I've mentioned, but also about the fact that these are people who had spent much of the last days of President Lungu's life, saying all manner of terrible things about him. So I think the family felt that delegation, could have been better. But there was, generally, I think from what we saw, there was the respect for the cabinet, its professionalism. And I think that the response that Kangwa has given, even in the aftermath of the ruling by the Constitutional Court, is correct. Is to simply emphasize how, for the government at least, because we have to understand that they have stated their rights, their interest in this matter is to say we want to accord former President Lungu a dignified burial, whatever. There might be dispute about how the meaning of what dignified burial is on either side. But what Kangwa is doing in that short statement is really to emphasize the 2 points. The first is that the government remains willing to negotiate, and in the absence of negotiations, they are also willing to make sure that they accept their rights through the court process. I think it was yesterday, I saw at NBC News, I think the 19 Hours Main News, where President Hichilema was meeting the Vice President of Zimbabwe. He was saying that they are in negotiation with the family. If you read the statement from the family, I think that was issued before this program earlier today, they disputed that assertion that there are negotiations that are taking place. There are none, and that's why I was saying I don't know why politicians find it so hard to do the right thing or to be truthful, where there's no need to be to be lying. You hear people saying this kind of thing, and it's not. You could even tell, even before the family, I think, issued the statement, that the president was being insincere, because if you are having negotiations with the family, as he was saying, then you don't need to ask for support, because in the same statement, or in the same meeting where he met the Vice President of Zimbabwe, he was also saying, asking for support, say, okay, we ask for support to resolve this matter. Why would you need support from a third party? If you're already talking to the family, it means all you need to do is to simply give room for those negotiations concluded. That's not the first time that the president is making this assertion that we are talking to family when the government is not doing so. Those things may look small, but you see, in the context of polarization where we are, the lack of trust, the breached trust that happened between the two parties, it's very, very important that the statement, particularly the public statement that government officials make, are rooted in honesty and the truthfulness, because as Kangwa is saying, It's possible that this thing may be resolved through negotiations because the court process is prolonged. So who knows, maybe both parties tomorrow will say, oh, we are willing to talk. But until that happens, it's very important that we don't create an impression that is not there to say people are talking. So the statement from the Secretary of Cabinet, I think, is simply acknowledging the fact that on the side of the government, nothing has changed. They will still respect the court process, and in this case, it means going back to the case that was suspended indefinitely, to resume that matter and allow the judges to hear the appeal for the application for leave to appeal, to allow both parties to make their arguments. And the Kangwa is effectively saying that's one route that we can take. The other one is we can talk about this thing and negotiate and see if we can resolve this matter outside court.
You don't think it's probably premature to state that the president lied of the fact that they're speaking to the family? The family could not be the one in South Africa, perhaps the family back here home. That's the family that they're engaging. But also, in his statement, the family representative, yes, he did acknowledge what you've said, that there was no negotiations of whatsoever that are currently ongoing, but he also acknowledges the fact that there's been a team that has been dispatched to come there to South Africa. Another issue that the president raised was he's got the argument that it's a legal requirement that all presidents that have died must be buried at Embassy Park. What do you make of his arguments?
I read that statement and I listened to it. It was also made in the context of that meeting which he had with the vice president of Zimbabwe. But I also read the statement I think it was the extended remarks he published in today's Newsdigger newspaper. The president never cited any specific provision of the law to back his assertion that's a legal requirement. He said there are two words he used that when you read the statement, when you listen to him speaking. One was tradition, that we have built this tradition of burying presidents, former president, at this place. That tradition is not law. When you go to what constitutes the laws of Zambia, tradition doesn't feature among them. In fact, anyone can go to Article 7 of the Constitution of Zambia. You'll find what is defined are the laws of Zambia. It's very clear. It's the Constitution, it's parliamentary statutes, it's statutory instruments, it's customary law. Even customary law is emphasized there. Now, you and I, Andrew, know that when it comes to customary law, the person who has ultimate authority over a deceased body is the next kin of the next of kin, and that's a family. And the president, therefore, was incorrect in saying that the laws of Zambia provide for the burial of for the designated embassy park as the burial place, or that president should be buried there. What he should have done, if he believes that it's a legal requirement, is to proceed to cite a specific statute to say, here is the law that gives us the authority as government to take the position that you have taken. You won't find that law because there's none. There's no law that allows the state to have a final say on the remains of the former president. That is a written law, for example, or statute. And for Zambia, the sources of the law is written law, but you could also say case law in case of court judgments. Again, even there, if he believes, for example, that the Kaunda, the judgment which was made by the court in the Kaunda case is law, he should have stated that so that at least we could discuss and say, here's where the president is coming from, here's his position, and here is the source of his understanding. Because if he says that is my source of understanding, meaning the Kaunda case, then we can also make an argument there. But that matter, the Kaunda case that is, was never decided on its merit. If you remember, after former President Kaunda died in Mainasoko Military Hospital, the family stated that they wished to bury him at their farm in State Lodge area, because before he died, he had left very clear instructions to say, I want to be buried next to my dear wife, Amabeti, when I die. But the Secretary of Cabinet announced at the time, this was under President Edgar Lungu's administration, they announced at the time that they will bury President Kaunda at Embassy Park. The family argued that that violated Kaunda's wishes, and more importantly, that the government didn't have any legal basis upon which to make such a decision, because governments must always act based on what the law provides for. Now, since we don't have any law that provides for Imbas Park as the burial place for former president of Zambia, they went to court. Now, they couldn't sue the state directly. So what they sought was leave to commence judicial review against the decision that was announced that Kaunda be buried at Imbas Park. If you remember, it was an application for judicial review of the decision that was made for the High Court, I think by Kawache Kaunda on behalf of the family. John Sangwa was the lawyer for that for the family. John is a friend of mine. We have had good conversations about this matter. What happened was that after they filed an agent application to stop the burial, the court, the Lusaka High Court, Judge Wilfred Mumba, never heard the matter until after burial had taken place. Then afterward, he made some comments that were not rooted in any law. It was basically a judge expressing opinions. Judges shouldn't give opinions. They should always cite the law that they are using to make the pronouncement that they make in a court. But the effect of his ruling was that he denied the founder family the leave to appeal, rather leave to seek judicial review. And because of that decision, that matter in the counter case was never decided or ventilated upon in open court. Because if he had approved that application for judicial review, then both parties, that is the state on one side and the counter family, would have gone to court to make a case in response to the question of who has ultimate authority over the remains or the body of a former president, or indeed the determination of the burial site. And because that matter was never decided after ventilation in open court, it's not then constituted part of case law, because there was no judgment in the matter. Of course, Muma gave the family the right to appeal against his ruling. But by the time he was doing so, it would have been pointless for the family to appeal, because the decision or the action that they sought to prevent, which is the burying Kaunda in a site that disregarded his wishes, had already taken place. It was on the 7th of July. The burial took place, finished, and then Muma issued the judgment late that day, according to what the legal team of the family told me. So you could clearly see that even under case law, that is not something that we could regard as precedent, which explains, for example, why even the South African High Court, in my view, erred when it used that as the basis for making a decision with regard to the claim that there's a law in Zambia that allows the state of the final say. There's none. But the court in South Africa, in my view, could have avoided this decision if they had sought the expert professional opinion of a Zambian law legal expert. Because if you are sitting as a South African judge, you can't surely enforce Zambian law without the benefit of a Zambian legal expert. I've avoided commenting on these matters on the case because, jurisdiction differs in terms of how they decide these cases. But I think that the judges should, at the very least, have sought the expert opinion of a Zambian legal expert to help them to understand whether that is precedent and what the import of that judgment, for example, was. So when the president issues a statement to the effect that there is a legal requirement, what is expected is not for him to simply issue that statement. It's also for him to say, here is the source of my opinion in terms of the law. Here is a written statute that provides that backs my assertion, or here is case law that backs my assertion, for example. When I read that statement from the president, I thought it was incorrect because there isn't any statute. Even in terms of tradition, for example, you could argue that, but we have buried all former presidents there, as well as presidents who have died in office. Yes, that's tradition. But as I said, tradition is not law. It is a tradition that a head of state lives in Nkwazi within the State House building. Hichilema doesn't live there. He lives at his house for whatever consideration. So tradition cannot be used as a basis for the law. And finally, very quickly, I should also mention that, this thing of saying or everybody's buried at Imbas Park, disregard the context. If you remember, the first person to be buried there was President Levi Mwanawasa when he died in 2008. But there was a video where Mwanawasa left a particular will to say he wished to be buried at his farm, I think in Paravana. The people who betrayed Mwanawasa are the family. They said they went with the government position after initial dispute and allowed him to be buried there. It shows again our disregard for the deceased's wishes, because here is somebody who left very ample evidence, unlike the Lungu case where you say he told the family to say, I don't want ABCD, but there's no video evidence. You had clear evidence here, and the government at the time, led by Rupiah Banda, disregarded working in collaboration with the family, Manawasa's wishes. And then you have the Kaunda issue. Again, it was disputed. The fact that both Mwanawasa and Kaunda were buried there doesn't show that there was unanimity in making the decision that ended up seeing these people being buried there. So that's not a place where you can cite as a national site.
Doc, this seems to be a very big problem, not only for Zambia, even our friends in Zimbabwe. When President Robert Mugabe died, the designated places where heroes are buried is at Heroes Acre. And there was this, impasse between the government of Zimbabwe and the family of Mugabe. Others have proposed that perhaps we must put it in our legislation that there must be, there must be legislation that give proper guidance to how a former head of state or a sitting president who dies must be buried, or the funerals must be treated. Do you support the call by stakeholders that we must legislate, these funerals by those that serve the highest office in our country?
I support the call for discussions. There must be dialogue, the discussion, the negotiation by Zambians to determine how this matter must be resolved. Clearly, there's the conflict that we have seen every time a president, the former president, arrives with regard to the burial site, means that we need to think clearly about the issue of where former presidents are buried. But the law should be, the law should be couched on the basis of public feedback. They should be able to say, we Zambians have decided through our representative in parliament that this is how we wish a former president or president be buried and where. There's a law to that effect in Tanzania, for example. And it also provides exemptions. People don't want to be buried there, for example. The state can excuse them to be buried elsewhere. It's important, if you have to avoid this kind of disputes, to think in that direction, so that we have a law, that provides for this kind of scenarios.
And lastly, as we conclude, we did see the statement that government made a few days ago, to the effect that the only one who is supposed to speak over this issue is Secretary to the Cabinet, Mr. Patrick Kangwa. And we also saw that the UPND, from the side of the party also, the Deputy Secretary General also issued a statement that the party members must refrain from making comments regarding this issue. Do you see this move by government and the UPND to be a wise move, especially that we are in this most sensitive moment where we still haven't buried our head of state? It's been over 2 months now.
I think so. I think that the decision by the UPND, the ruling party, to ban its members from making comments on the burial, on the dispute around the burial of President Lungu is correct and is commendable. Some people may say it's a slightly too late, but it's a welcome move, because there were so many sentiments that were being expressed by supporters of the governing party. Some of them quite.
Thanks for tuning in to JQ News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the latest updates on tech, politics, and everything in between. Until next time, stay cool.